Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the soothing world of ancient Chinese tea ceremonies. Imagine yourself walking into a quiet, dimly lit room. The air is filled with the scent of freshly brewed tea, a hint of jasmine or green leaves, and the gentle sound of water splashing against porcelain. You're about to experience a ritual that has been practiced for over 1,000 years, blending tranquility with tradition. It's the kind of thing that transports you far away from modern life. No buzzing phones, no deadlines. Just the calming rhythm of tea preparation. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this if you're looking for a high-energy adventure. This is all about slowing down. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're in the mood, drop a comment with your location and local time. It's always interesting to see where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ancient Chinese tea ceremony wasn't just about brewing a cup of tea. It was a reflection of culture, philosophy, and a deep connection to nature. This wasn't a fast, grab-and-go situation. Oh no. Tea, in ancient China, was part of a calm, deliberate ritual. It wasn't something you casually sipped while scrolling through your phone. Rather, it was an occasion for reflection, an opportunity to center oneself in the moment, and of course, a chance to socialize. The entire process, from the boiling of the water to the delicate pouring into fine porcelain cups, was a carefully choreographed dance. But before we get to the intricacies of the ceremony, let's go back to the beginning. How did tea become such an essential part of Chinese life? Well, historians trace it all back to the legendary Emperor Shen Nong. It's said that around 2737 BC, Shen Nong accidentally discovered tea when a leaf from a wild tree blew into his pot of boiling water. We're talking about a chance event that changed the world forever. Can you imagine how strange it must have felt to sip that first cup of tea? But soon enough, tea became known for its refreshing taste and health benefits, and it didn't take long before it was celebrated across China. As we journey deeper into the world of tea, let's talk about how tea became a staple in daily Chinese life. While we often think of tea as something reserved for special occasions, in ancient China, it was far more than a luxury. It was woven into the very fabric of society. By the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 AD, tea had become so integral that it was part of the regular routines of people from all walks of life. Tea didn't just live in the homes of scholars and emperors. It was also a common drink enjoyed by farmers, merchants, and even soldiers. It was what you'd sip after a long day's work, or in between business dealings. Tea was both a simple pleasure and a symbol of connection. The basic process of tea making was pretty simple. It was about brewing leaves in hot water. Nothing too complex at first glance. But when you look closer, you see that the entire process had its own rituals. The leaves, the temperature of the water, even the utensils used were all chosen with care, each influencing the taste and the experience. Every small detail had its place in the ceremony. And speaking of ceremony, let's talk about the unique nature of tea in Chinese culture. Tea wasn't just a drink, it was a medium for connection. When guests arrived at a home, they were offered tea as a sign of respect. Whether it was a formal gathering or an intimate conversation, tea was an essential part of the welcome. Historians still argue whether tea's true purpose was to nourish the body or the soul. Was it all about the health benefits, or was there something deeper at play? Maybe a little of both. The ritual of tea making was seen as a path to personal harmony. In fact, the act of brewing and serving tea became something that reflected the inner state of the person making it. Calm, precise movements were believed to bring clarity of mind and a sense of tranquility. And for those who wanted to dive even deeper into tea's power, it became a symbol of spiritual awakening, particularly in the Zen-like traditions of Buddhist monks. They viewed tea as a form of mindfulness, a way to anchor themselves in the present. There's something profoundly calming about this simple act, don't you think? Pouring water over delicate leaves, watching them unfurl, smelling the rising steam. It's a moment of stillness in a busy world. Now let's explore one of the most fascinating aspects of ancient Chinese tea culture, its role in the emperor's court. If you think your morning cup of tea is special, just wait until you hear about the tea rituals of the imperial court. Imagine, if you will, a vast ornate palace, its halls echoing with the quiet footsteps of servants. In this setting, tea wasn't just about relaxation, it was a statement of power, refinement, and connection to the divine. For the emperor, tea wasn't just a drink, it was a key part of court life, a way to reflect their elevated status and control over the empire. During the Tang dynasty, emperors would hold elaborate tea ceremonies, sometimes as a public spectacle for diplomats and foreign visitors. These ceremonies weren't quick affairs. No, they were carefully choreographed events, steeped in layers of meaning. The emperor's favorite tea, often a rare and expensive variety, would be prepared by skilled tea masters who were responsible for every small detail, from the water's temperature to the precise way the leaves were added to the pot. The emperor would take the first sip, savoring it, while attendants waited in the background. Every movement was a performance, every word measured. Historians still debate whether these ceremonies were purely ceremonial or whether they served a deeper political purpose. Were they simply an opportunity to showcase imperial grandeur? Or did they also act as a kind of performance to reinforce the emperor's divine right to rule? Regardless of the politics, the tea ceremonies in the imperial court were an important symbol of the emperor's role as a mediator between the human and the divine. And, as we all know, tea was a very serious matter in ancient China, too serious to leave to chance. It was a highly ritualized experience that required the attention of skilled experts who understood not only the techniques of brewing, but also the symbolic meaning behind every gesture. For the emperor, the act of drinking tea was seen as a way of aligning oneself with the natural forces of the world. As the tea leaves floated and unfurled in the warm water, it was believed that they carried with them the essence of the universe, flavors, scents, and energies that connected the emperor with the land he ruled. And this wasn't just about physical enjoyment. In the emperor's mind, each sip was an affirmation of power, of control, and perhaps even of fate itself. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the origins of tea cultivation. Now, the history of tea's cultivation is as rich and steeped as the beverage itself. Legend has it that the tea plant, Camellia sinensis, was discovered in China around 2737 BC, as we mentioned earlier, when Emperor Shen Nong accidentally had a leaf fall into his pot of boiling water. This moment would change the world forever, but the real magic of tea comes from the centuries of cultivation that followed. In ancient China, tea wasn't something that grew wild everywhere. It was a rare and mystical plant, mostly found in the higher altitudes of southern China. But over time, the Chinese became experts in tea cultivation, refining the process and even developing specific varieties of tea to suit different tastes and purposes. The ancient Chinese tea masters were not just gardeners. They were artisans who worked with nature, using methods that were both practical and spiritual. The actual process of cultivating tea is an art form, one that requires deep knowledge of the land, the climate, and the plant itself. Ancient tea farmers would plant tea bushes on mountain slopes, ensuring the plants received the perfect balance of sunlight and moisture. Tea cultivation was no small task. It was labor-intensive, requiring farmers to tend to the plants year-round, carefully plucking the leaves at just the right moment for harvest. As with the tea ceremonies, there was a rhythm to the work. It wasn't about rushing through the motions. It was about taking time, about care, patience, and respect for nature. Historians still argue whether the first domestication of tea was accidental or intentional. Some believe the early Chinese stumbled upon the idea of cultivating tea after discovering it growing wild in the mountains, while others argue that tea was actively cultivated from the very beginning. One thing is certain, though. The Chinese were incredibly skilled at growing tea, and their methods were passed down through generations. Tea farmers were revered, and their work was seen as essential to both the economy and the culture. The appreciation of tea extended beyond just drinking it. It was a reflection of Chinese values like patience, reverence for nature, and the belief in harmony between humans and the earth. The cultivation of tea spread over time, but it was the Chinese who truly perfected it. The distinct varieties we know today, green tea, oolong, and black tea, can all trace their roots back to these early tea masters. The methods developed by these ancient farmers are still used in some parts of China today, where tea is grown with the same reverence and care as it was centuries ago. The world may have caught up to China's tea legacy, but the Chinese were the first to create this legacy, and they still hold the secret to some of the finest teas in the world. Now that we've delved into the origins of tea cultivation, let's look at the ceremonial tools that played a central role in the ancient Chinese tea ritual. If you've ever looked at a beautiful, delicate teacup and thought, "This must be more than just a drinking vessel," you'd be absolutely right. Tea ceremonies in ancient China weren't just about the tea itself. They were also about the objects that accompanied it. Each tool had its purpose and its meaning, transforming the act of drinking tea into a spiritual and aesthetic experience. One of the most iconic pieces in the tea ceremony was the teapot. The design of the teapot was a work of art in itself. Porcelain was the material of choice, and the best teapots were made with such precision that their shape allowed for the perfect infusion of tea leaves. The way the water was poured, the way the leaves unfurled within the pot, everything was part of a delicate choreography. The teapot wasn't just a functional object. It was a symbol of harmony and balance. And while we might take for granted the humble teapot today, in ancient China, it was considered a treasure. Then, there were the cups. Oh, the cups! These weren't just any cups you'd pick up at a local market. They were handcrafted, often painted with intricate designs, and made from the finest porcelain. The cups were small, deliberately so, because the tea was meant to be sipped slowly, with intention. The delicate nature of the cup mirrored the ritual's very essence. Each sip was meant to be savored, each moment a pause in the fast pace of life. The light clink of porcelain against porcelain, the warmth of the cup in your hands, it all created a serene, almost meditative atmosphere. You couldn't rush it. Historians still argue whether the tools used in tea ceremonies were symbolic of greater philosophical beliefs, or whether they were simply practical. Some claim that the art of brewing tea was intended to reflect the principles of Zen Buddhism, where each movement had purpose and meaning. Others believe that the beauty of the utensils themselves was a reflection of the reverence the Chinese had for nature and the cosmos. No matter which camp you fall into, one thing is clear. The objects used in the ceremony were just as important as the tea. They were a visual representation of the harmony and balance sought in every tea-drinking moment. Other tools included the tea strainer, the tea whisk, and the tea bowl, each crafted with the same care and attention to detail. The tea strainer, used to filter out the fine tea leaves, was a delicate instrument, often made of bamboo or fine metal mesh. The tea whisk, used in some ceremonies to froth the tea, was a symbol of the perfect balance between simplicity and elegance. The bowl, large enough to hold the tea but not too large to overwhelm the senses, was the centerpiece of the ritual. Together, these tools didn't just make tea, they created a peaceful ritual. They elevated tea drinking from a simple act to an art form. And as we continue our journey through the tea ceremony, keep these tools in mind, as they were the physical anchors of a practice that transcended mere consumption. Every element, from the smallest teapot to the largest teacup, helped to slow time down, one sip at a time. Now, let's take a closer look at the heart of the tea ceremony itself, the process of tea preparation. When you think of making tea today, you probably just boil some water, throw in a tea bag, and wait a couple of minutes. But in ancient China, tea preparation was nothing short of a meditative experience. Every step was performed with precision, care, and a deep respect for the tea's ability to connect the drinker with both nature and their inner self. The first step in this tea-making ritual was selecting the leaves. In ancient times, this was far more involved than simply grabbing a tea bag from the pantry. Tea leaves were harvested by hand, often by experienced workers who could tell the perfect time to pluck the leaves. The most delicate, tender leaves were chosen for high-quality teas, while the older leaves might be used for more everyday brews. But it wasn't just about picking any leaves. It was about choosing the right ones that would carry the essence of the tea plant and transform it into an experience of both flavor and tranquility. Once the leaves were carefully harvested, the next step was preparing the water. In ancient China, water wasn't just boiled and dumped on the leaves. It was treated with the same respect as the tea itself. The temperature of the water was considered crucial, as it could significantly affect the taste of the tea. For delicate green teas, the water needed to be just the right temperature, not too hot, not too cold. Too hot, and the tea would become bitter. Too cold, and the full flavor wouldn't be extracted. Tea masters knew this instinctively, and they would carefully monitor the water's temperature before pouring it over the leaves. It was said that the perfect temperature could only be achieved by listening to the sound of the boiling water and watching the bubbles. It wasn't a rushed task. It was something that required patience and sensitivity. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on the water temperature was primarily a functional decision, or whether it was rooted in a deeper, spiritual philosophy. Some believe it was a symbolic gesture, an acknowledgement of the harmony between water, leaves, and the drinker. Others think it was a way of honing the tea maker's attentiveness to the smallest details. Perhaps it was both. The fact remains that the temperature of the water, just as with the selection of the tea leaves, was never taken for granted. Once the water was prepared, the next step was the steeping process. This was perhaps the most intimate part of the ritual, as it required the tea master to feel the rhythm of the tea, to sense when it was ready. The leaves would be placed in the teapot, and the water poured over them in a slow, deliberate motion. It wasn't rushed. The tea needed time to infuse with the water, to release its essence fully. Tea masters would sometimes perform this task in front of their guests, as a way of demonstrating the care and attention required for the perfect cup. The steeping process didn't last long, though. Too much steeping, and the tea would become bitter and overpowering. Too little, and the flavors would be weak and unrefined. Finding the perfect balance was an art, and it was something that was passed down from master to apprentice. Every tea master had their own unique way of preparing tea, based on years of practice and a deep understanding of the leaves, water, and time. This is where the true magic of the ceremony happened, not just in the tea itself, but in the space between each step, in the quiet moments of focus and awareness that connected everyone involved. As the tea was steeping, the guests would quietly await the moment when it was ready. The silence was an essential part of the ceremony. It wasn't just about the tea, but about creating a space where time seemed to stand still. The atmosphere was calm, peaceful, perfect for contemplation or quiet conversation. It was a reminder that life, like the tea, should be savored slowly, one moment at a time. And then, at last, the tea was ready. It was poured into delicate cups, the fragrance rising gently from the surface, inviting the drinker to take that first sip. But remember, this wasn't about gulping down the tea. It was about savoring it, experiencing its depth, and allowing it to settle within you. A simple act, yet one that could bring about a sense of clarity, peace, and connection to the world around you. Now that we've explored the process of tea preparation, let's turn our attention to the philosophy behind the tea ceremony, how tea became more than just a drink. For the ancient Chinese, tea wasn't just about quenching thirst or enjoying a warm beverage. It was a way to align oneself with nature, to promote mental clarity, and to deepen one's connection to the universe. The ritual of tea preparation and consumption was deeply influenced by the three main philosophical schools of thought in China: Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. Taoism, with its emphasis on harmony with nature and the flow of life, had a significant influence on the tea ceremony. Tea was seen as a symbol of the Tao, the natural order of the universe. The act of making tea, of carefully selecting the leaves, monitoring the water's temperature, and patiently waiting for the tea to steep, was viewed as a practice in surrendering to the natural rhythm of the world. There was no rushing through it. The tea maker was encouraged to be fully present in the moment, to listen to the sounds of the tea leaves unfurling and the water gently boiling. The Taoist belief that the universe flows naturally in cycles was mirrored in the cyclical process of making and drinking tea, which, in turn, was believed to restore balance to the individual. Confucianism, on the other hand, focused on social harmony, respect, and ritual. In the context of the tea ceremony, these values were evident in the way tea was served to others. When offering tea to guests, it was not just a gesture of hospitality, it was a sign of respect. Tea was offered with humility, and the process of serving it was just as important as the tea itself. The tea master would make sure that the guests' cups were filled with care, ensuring that everyone had the perfect amount of tea to enjoy. In a way, the tea ceremony embodied Confucian ideals of propriety, etiquette, and respect for others. Tea wasn't just about personal enjoyment. It was about creating a harmonious atmosphere where everyone could connect with one another, in silence or in conversation, in a way that respected both the individual and the community. Buddhism, too, played its part in shaping the tea ceremony. In Buddhist thought, tea was seen as a tool for mindfulness and meditation. The quiet, deliberate preparation of tea was seen as a form of mental training, a way to practice presence and awareness. Tea was consumed slowly, with full attention to the moment, fostering a sense of inner peace. The simple act of drinking tea was viewed as a way to clear the mind, as each sip could lead the drinker closer to enlightenment. In fact, tea was often consumed during meditation sessions to enhance focus and concentration. For Buddhist monks, tea wasn't just a drink. It was a way of maintaining a calm and clear mind, essential for deep spiritual practice. Historians still debate whether the tea ceremony was more a product of Taoist, Confucian, or Buddhist thought, or perhaps a blend of all three. Some argue that Taoism's emphasis on nature made it the most influential philosophy in the development of the tea ceremony, while others contend that Confucianism's focus on ritual and respect for others gave the tea ceremony its social significance. And of course, Buddhist influence on mindfulness can't be overlooked. Perhaps the true answer lies in the synergy between these philosophies, each contributing a unique element to the practice. Whatever the case may be, the tea ceremony in ancient China became a vessel for spiritual, social, and personal reflection, grounding people in the moment and allowing them to connect with the deeper aspects of life. In this way, tea became not just a drink, but a medium through which one could explore the mysteries of existence. It was a tool for self-cultivation, a practice that nurtured both the body and the mind. And for those who embraced it fully, the tea ceremony was a way of embodying the wisdom of the ancients, a path to inner peace and balance in a chaotic world. Now that we've explored the deeper philosophies behind the tea ceremony, let's look at how tea, once the exclusive privilege of the elite, gradually spread to the common people of China. While tea's roots were firmly planted in the emperor's court and among the learned classes, over time, it became an integral part of everyday life for people from all walks of society. This transformation didn't happen overnight, but by the time of the Song dynasty, 960 to 1279 AD, tea had evolved from a luxurious commodity to a drink that could be enjoyed by everyone, from royalty to farmers, merchants to monks. As tea's popularity grew, it also began to take on different forms depending on who was drinking it and where. For the wealthy, tea continued to be a symbol of status. In the imperial court, tea remained a carefully curated experience, an intricate ritual that reflected the status and refined taste of its drinkers. But for commoners, tea drinking became much more practical. It was no longer just about ceremony, it was about refreshment, social bonding, and daily life. At its core, tea was still a shared experience, one that brought people together. Whether it was a family gathering at home, or a conversation between merchants at a bustling market. Tea served as a unifying force. It became a beverage that could accompany both solemn moments of reflection and light-hearted exchanges. It wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about the simple joy of a hot cup of tea, enjoyed in the company of friends or family. Tea's shift from the royal courts to the homes of the common people was partly driven by the availability of tea leaves. As tea cultivation spread throughout China, especially to the regions of Fujian, Zhejiang, and Yunnan, tea became more accessible. With the rise of tea trade, both locally and internationally, the price of tea began to drop. What was once an expensive luxury slowly became affordable to many, especially as the art of tea-making itself became more widespread. The spread of tea cultivation and trade created an entirely new industry in China, one that employed countless people and provided a steady source of income for farmers. By the time the Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644 AD, came around, tea was not only a drink enjoyed by all levels of society, but it had also become a key part of the Chinese economy. Farmers were producing tea in greater quantities, and the Chinese began exporting it to neighboring regions, including Japan and Korea, where tea culture began to take root. This period saw the development of different tea varieties, including the introduction of new tea-making techniques, such as the development of loose-leaf tea. The Chinese also began to refine the use of tea utensils, and the tea ceremony, though still rooted in ancient traditions, became a more accessible experience for everyone. Historians still argue about the role that tea trade played in the democratization of tea culture. Some claim that the mass production of tea allowed it to spread quickly and easily, while others argue that the spread of tea was more about cultural and social changes that occurred over time. Either way, tea became a part of everyday life, a drink that transcended class and region, bringing people together across the country. As the tea drinking experience became more universal, it also began to evolve into the social rituals we associate with tea today. While the formal tea ceremonies still held sway in high society, tea gatherings became more informal and relaxed in the homes of the common people. It wasn't about the elegance of the tools or the precision of the brewing, it was about the connection. Tea was, and still is, an experience of sharing a moment, whether in silence or conversation, and it became a drink that anyone could enjoy, from the humblest of farmers to the most powerful of emperors. Let's now turn our focus to the individuals who truly shaped the world of tea, China's tea masters. These were the highly skilled artisans who devoted their lives to perfecting the art of tea preparation, elevating it from a daily ritual to an art form. Tea masters were not just experts in selecting the finest leaves, they were also stewards of tradition, passing down their knowledge to the next generation. Their work in refining the tea-making process, in perfecting each step from leaf selection to brewing temperature, is what truly made tea ceremonies a revered practice in Chinese culture. The title of tea master wasn't given lightly. To become a master required years of training, practice, and an intimate knowledge of tea's various varieties. Much like a wine sommelier today, a tea master needed to understand the subtle differences between teas, knowing exactly when to pick the leaves for the optimal taste and how to brew them to bring out their full flavor. The tea master's role was often passed down within families or closely guarded circles, making it an exclusive art that required devotion and respect. These tea masters were also responsible for developing new techniques, many of which have lasted to this day. For example, during the Tang Dynasty, tea masters began experimenting with different methods of brewing, moving away from the crude methods used by earlier generations. They perfected the art of steaming and pressing tea leaves, which led to the creation of compact tea bricks, a method that made the transportation of tea much easier. This also helped make tea more accessible to a broader audience, as tea could now be traded and stored for longer periods without losing quality. Historians still argue whether these innovations were driven by necessity or by a deeper philosophical belief that the process of making tea could be perfected. Tea masters also played an important role in the spiritual and cultural aspects of the ceremony. The process of making tea was deeply tied to the philosophical teachings of Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. A tea master didn't just brew tea, they created an experience that could transport drinkers into a state of calm and mindfulness. The movements of the tea master during the ceremony were as important as the tea itself. Each step, from the slow pouring of the water to the careful placing of the teapot, was meant to embody grace and precision. These movements were considered an expression of inner tranquility, a reminder to the drinker that the art of tea was not just about the drink, but about the stillness of the mind. In the imperial courts, tea masters were revered, and some even held high ranks in the emperor's court. They were often consulted on matters of tea etiquette and were trusted with the most important ceremonies. However, tea masters weren't just found in the royal palaces. Many of the best tea masters came from humble backgrounds and worked their way up through apprenticeships. This shows just how important tea culture was to the Chinese people. Tea wasn't just an exclusive indulgence for the wealthy. It was a practice that anyone could learn, provided they were dedicated enough. Over time, as tea culture spread across China, tea masters became revered figures in their own right, with their work celebrated in literature and art. The tea master's ability to craft the perfect brew was seen as a reflection of their personal discipline and understanding of nature. They became symbols of harmony and peace, and their role in the tea ceremony was considered just as important as the drink itself. Historians continue to debate the significance of the tea master's role in the evolution of tea culture. Was it simply the evolution of tea-making techniques that made tea so revered? Or was it the tea master's spiritual connection to the tea itself that truly elevated the ceremony? Some believe that the role of the tea master is what gave tea ceremonies their depth and meaning, while others argue that the practice was always more about the drink itself and the connections it fostered. No matter which perspective you take, one thing is clear. Without the tea masters, the tea ceremonies we know today would not have been possible. Now that we've seen the mastery behind the tea ceremony, let's dive into the health benefits that tea was believed to bring. While the experience of tea was undoubtedly a cultural and philosophical practice, it was also widely regarded as a form of natural medicine. In ancient China, tea was not just something to sip for pleasure, it was considered a medicinal elixir with health benefits that stretched far beyond simple hydration. From detoxifying the body to calming the mind, tea was a drink that worked wonders for both the body and the spirit. Tea was often prescribed by herbalists as a remedy for various ailments. For example, green tea, which is rich in antioxidants, was believed to aid in digestion, improve circulation, and help with detoxification. It was also thought to be an excellent remedy for fatigue, and the gentle caffeine boost it provided was seen as a healthier alternative to the stronger, harsher stimulants available at the time. Whether you were recovering from illness or simply needed a pick-me-up after a long day of work, a cup of tea was the perfect tonic. But it wasn't just about physical health. Tea also had significant effects on mental well-being. Tea was regarded as a natural mood stabilizer, helping to calm the mind and reduce stress. The soothing ritual of tea preparation, coupled with the calming effects of the beverage itself, created a sense of tranquility and balance. In fact, tea was so widely used for its mental health benefits that it was often recommended by Buddhist monks during meditation sessions. The drink's gentle effects on the mind helped monks maintain their focus and achieve a state of deep concentration. Historians still debate whether the medicinal properties of tea were widely known during the early stages of its popularity, or if they became more prominent over time. Some scholars suggest that the therapeutic benefits of tea were always understood, while others believe that these benefits became more pronounced as tea culture spread and evolved. Either way, tea quickly became ingrained in both daily life and medical practice, with its reputation as a health elixir becoming an essential part of its appeal. Tea's health benefits weren't just limited to physical and mental well-being. It was also believed to have spiritual benefits. Tea was often consumed as a means of purifying the body and soul, helping the drinker achieve balance and harmony. This idea of tea as a form of spiritual cleansing is especially prevalent in Taoist thought, where the act of drinking tea was seen as a way to cleanse the body of impurities and restore energy flow. Tea was also associated with longevity, a long and healthy life, something that the ancient Chinese deeply valued. In fact, some of the earliest references to tea in Chinese literature emphasize its ability to promote a long, prosperous life. Tea was not just a drink to be consumed when one was unwell. It was part of a preventative health strategy. Its antioxidants and other healing compounds were believed to strengthen the immune system, boost energy, and protect against various illnesses. Tea was an essential part of daily life, something to be consumed regularly, much like a daily vitamin. And in a time when modern medicine didn't exist in the way we know it today, this simple beverage was an essential part of maintaining health. So, whether you were using tea to soothe your stomach, clear your mind, or enhance your spiritual practice, it was clear that tea was much more than just a drink. It was a powerful, multi-purpose tool for health and well-being, a gift from nature that the ancient Chinese cherished and revered. Let's now shift our focus to the role of tea in China's global influence, particularly how it spread along the famous Silk Road. We've already discussed how tea became an essential part of daily life in China, but its cultural and economic impact didn't stop at China's borders. Tea would soon embark on a long journey across Asia, Europe, and beyond. And along the way, it would weave its way into the fabric of other cultures, each of which would adapt and shape tea in their own way. The Silk Road, that vast network of trade routes connecting China to Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, was crucial in this process. Merchants, travelers, and diplomats used these routes to exchange goods, ideas, and, yes, tea. By the time the Tang dynasty reached its peak, China's tea had already begun making its way westward, with the earliest known references to tea in Central Asia dating back to the 7th century. But it wasn't just the traders who were interested in tea. Tea became an important commodity along the Silk Road, alongside other valuable goods like silk, spices, and precious metals. Historians still argue over the exact timeline and the route that tea took from China to the West. Some believe that tea made its first significant appearance in Central Asia, where it was embraced by the wealthy elite. Others suggest that the tea trade expanded to Persia before reaching the Byzantine Empire and eventually Europe. Regardless of the exact path, it's clear that tea played an important role in the cultural exchange between East and West. By the time the Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644, began to flourish, tea was already a luxury item in many parts of the world. In the West, tea was initially met with a great deal of fascination. The first European encounter with tea occurred in the early 17th century, when Dutch traders brought the drink to the Netherlands and England. But the true explosion of tea culture in the West didn't happen until the British East India Company began importing large quantities of tea to Britain in the 18th century. It was during this time that tea began to be viewed not only as a symbol of wealth and sophistication, but also as an essential part of daily life. The famous British tea culture, with its afternoon tea rituals and elaborate teapot collections, can trace its roots back to these early interactions with Chinese tea. But tea's impact didn't stop in Europe. In Japan, tea had a profound cultural influence, particularly in the development of the Japanese tea ceremony. The Japanese embraced tea as a symbol of Zen Buddhism and created their own intricate tea rituals, which emphasized simplicity, humility, and the beauty of imperfection. Japan's tea culture, which evolved alongside China's, became one of the most celebrated and revered tea traditions in the world. As the tea trade continued to expand, it became clear that tea was not just a drink, it was a cultural artifact, one that carried with it the philosophies, values, and aesthetics of the cultures that embraced it. Historians also note the influence of the Silk Road on the development of tea drinking practices in Central Asia and the Middle East. In places like Persia and India, tea was infused with spices, creating the distinctive chai tea that would later become famous around the world. Tea in these regions was often accompanied by sugar, milk, and a variety of spices like cinnamon, cardamom, and ginger, giving it a completely different flavor profile than the more minimalist teas enjoyed in China. The Silk Road not only facilitated the movement of tea, but also allowed for the exchange of ideas about how tea should be enjoyed. leading to the creation of unique and diverse tea cultures around the world. By the time tea had made its way to the West, it was no longer just a Chinese cultural treasure. It had become an international commodity, a symbol of wealth and refinement, but also a drink for the masses. Tea was no longer just an elite beverage enjoyed in the palaces and temples of China. It had become a global force, influencing cultures, economies, and social structures across the world. As we continue our exploration of tea's impact, let's delve into the deep symbolism and rituals associated with tea sharing in ancient China. Tea was far more than just a drink. It was a bridge between people, a symbol of respect, harmony, and connection. The act of sharing tea was seen as a sacred, almost spiritual gesture. Whether between family members, friends, or strangers, offering tea was a powerful symbol of goodwill, and the process of preparing and sharing it carried deep meaning in Chinese culture. Tea ceremonies were often held to mark important events: births, marriages, festivals, and even funerals. At these moments, tea was more than just a beverage. It was a way of uniting people and reinforcing social bonds. In a way, the tea ceremony embodied the very essence of Chinese values, including respect for others, mindfulness, and balance. Tea was used as a tool for fostering harmony in relationships, whether between individuals or entire communities. One of the most significant tea-sharing rituals was the tea marriage, where a young couple would offer tea to their parents as part of their wedding ceremony. This gesture wasn't just about offering a drink, it was a symbol of respect and gratitude toward the couple's parents for raising them. By offering tea, the couple acknowledged the sacrifices their parents had made and showed their deep appreciation. This tradition was a profound expression of familial love and filial piety, which has always been at the heart of Chinese culture. Historians still debate whether tea ceremonies in these contexts were primarily symbolic, or if they served a practical function in solidifying social ties. Some scholars believe that the act of offering tea in these ceremonies was meant to reinforce the social structure, ensuring respect between different generations and social classes. Others argue that the ritual was more spiritual in nature, designed to foster harmony and balance in relationships. Regardless of the exact interpretation, it's clear that tea-sharing rituals played a central role in maintaining the social fabric of ancient Chinese society. In addition to family and ceremonial occasions, tea was also shared as a sign of respect and friendship. Offering tea to a guest was considered one of the highest forms of hospitality. The tea ceremony provided an opportunity for people to engage in quiet conversation, bond over shared experiences, or simply enjoy each other's company in peaceful silence. In a world that often feels rushed and hectic, the act of sharing a cup of tea was a reminder to slow down and savor the present moment. This tradition of sharing tea as a gesture of friendship and respect continues in many parts of the world today, from China to Japan, and even in the modern-day tea houses in the West. One particularly unique practice was the use of tea as an offering to ancestors. In many Chinese households, it was customary to offer a cup of tea to the spirits of deceased family members, particularly during the Qingming festival. This was seen as a way of honoring the ancestors, ensuring that their spirits were at peace, and maintaining a connection between the past and present. Tea in this context wasn't just a tribute. It was believed to bridge the gap between the living and the dead, allowing for communication across the boundaries of life and death. Historians still argue over the precise origins of these tea rituals. Were they strictly a product of Chinese cultural traditions, or were they influenced by Buddhism and Taoism, both of which emphasized rituals as ways to create spiritual connections? Whatever the answer, it's clear that tea-sharing rituals were central to Chinese social and spiritual life, fostering a sense of unity, respect, and mindfulness among those who participated. As tea traveled beyond China, these traditions of tea-sharing and symbolic rituals also spread. Tea became a universal symbol of hospitality and respect, practiced in many cultures around the world. But no matter where tea found its way, its symbolism as a bridge between people, a tool for connection, remained unchanged. From the ceremonial teas of the Chinese courts to the informal tea gatherings in homes, the act of sharing tea continues to bring people together, reinforcing bonds of friendship, respect, and understanding. As we reach the twilight of our journey through the history of tea, let's turn to a more somber reflection: the decline of traditional tea ceremonies in China. In the face of westernization, modernization, and shifts in Chinese society, the once revered and intricate tea rituals began to fade into the background. This was a gradual transformation, one that occurred over several centuries, as global trade and the forces of industrialization reshaped Chinese culture in the 19th and 20th centuries. At the heart of this decline was the rise of convenience. As the world became more connected and faster-paced, people began to move away from the time-consuming, contemplative nature of the tea ceremony. Instead, tea became increasingly commercialized, mass-produced, and available in quick, easily accessible forms. The simple act of pouring a cup of tea in a busy household no longer required the careful, mindful preparation that was once considered essential. In its place came the ubiquitous tea bags, which, though convenient, lacked the ritual and meaning of the traditional process. The intimate, meditative experience that was once tied to tea had begun to disappear in favor of efficiency. This shift wasn't just about convenience, it was also about broader cultural changes. With the arrival of Western influence, particularly during the late Qing dynasty, 1644 to 1912, the tea ceremony began to seem increasingly old-fashioned to many Chinese people. Westerners, with their own coffee-drinking traditions, began to dominate the global beverage market, and their commercial practices quickly found their way into China. As Western ideas began to take root, traditional tea practices were often seen as a remnant of an old, backward era. This perception was amplified by the tumult of the early 20th century, including the rise of communism, which sought to modernize and radically transform China's social fabric. In this period, traditional customs and rituals, including the tea ceremony, were often sidelined in favor of a more utilitarian approach to life. Historians still argue about the impact of the Cultural Revolution, 1966-1976, on tea culture in China. Some believe that this period marked the final nail in the coffin for traditional tea ceremonies, as the government pushed for a complete break from feudal and bourgeois practices. Tea, once a symbol of Chinese cultural identity, was now reduced to a simple commodity. Others argue that the impact of the Cultural Revolution was less significant than the ongoing shifts in Chinese society brought on by globalization and the rise of modern consumer culture. However, despite the decline of the tea ceremony in traditional forms, tea has never truly disappeared from Chinese life. While the ritualistic, highly formalized tea ceremonies of the past may have faded, tea continues to play a major role in Chinese society today. The rise of tea culture in the global marketplace has led to a resurgence of interest in traditional tea practices, particularly among younger generations. In the modern age, tea houses, tea festivals, and workshops are flourishing across China, where people are once again rediscovering the ancient art of tea making. The tea ceremony, while not as ubiquitous as it once was, is still practiced by a select few, ensuring that the centuries-old traditions live on. Historians and cultural critics still debate whether the decline of the traditional tea ceremony represents a loss of Chinese cultural heritage or an inevitable evolution. Some argue that modern life has stripped away the deeper meanings of the tea ceremony, reducing it to a mere beverage. Others believe that tea's continued popularity in China, and its resurgence in more modern, informal settings, demonstrates its resilience and ability to adapt. The question remains, has the essence of tea as a cultural and spiritual practice been lost, or is it simply evolving in response to new social realities? As we consider the decline of traditional tea ceremonies, it's important to remember that tea is far more than a drink. It's a symbol of cultural identity, a medium for connection, and a practice that transcends time. While the ceremonial aspects may have changed, the essence of tea, its ability to bring people together, to encourage mindfulness, and to offer solace, remains unchanged. Tea has adapted to the rhythms of modern life, but its fundamental role in Chinese culture and in the cultures of many other nations endures. As we approach the final chapters of our tea journey, let's explore how the traditional tea ceremony has morphed into modern tea culture. While the formalized tea rituals of ancient China may not be as prevalent today, their legacy lives on in the vibrant and ever-evolving tea culture we see around the world. In China, as well as globally, the deep appreciation for tea continues to thrive, albeit in different forms. The essence of tea, its cultural significance, its calming properties, and its ability to foster connection, remains central, even as it adapts to the fast-paced demands of modern life. One of the most notable shifts in modern tea culture has been the explosion of specialty teas and tea blends. While traditional tea ceremonies focused on a select few types of tea, such as green tea, oolong, and pu'er, the global tea market now offers an incredible variety of flavors, blends, and infusions. From floral teas like jasmine and chamomile to fruity blends and even savory options, there's a tea for almost every taste and occasion. This explosion of flavors has brought a new sense of creativity to the tea experience, while still honoring the ancient tradition of steeping leaves in hot water. It's the same ritual, but with a modern twist. This modernization of tea culture has also brought about a renewed focus on sustainability and wellness. With the rise of organic and fair trade tea movements, consumers today are more conscious than ever about the environmental and ethical implications of their tea choices. The modern tea drinker is not just interested in a good brew, they're also thinking about the sustainability of the tea farms, the impact of tea production on the environment, and the social responsibility of the brands they buy from. Tea has become a drink of mindfulness, not only for the body, but also for the planet. Tea culture has also become a significant part of the global wellness movement. While ancient Chinese tea ceremonies were often centered around the mind and spirit, today's tea culture has expanded to include health-focused trends like detox teas, green tea for weight loss, and blends designed to boost energy or promote sleep. Whether it's sipping a calming herbal blend before bed or choosing a matcha latte to fuel your morning, tea has become intertwined with the modern quest for balance and well-being. People have come to view tea as more than just a drink. It's a tool for self-care, offering everything from relaxation to invigoration. But modern tea culture isn't all about wellness or flavors. The social aspect of tea drinking, which has been such an integral part of its history, is still very much alive today. Tea houses, both in China and around the world, continue to serve as gathering places where people can come together to relax, chat, and share a pot of tea. In China, as well as in countries like Japan, Taiwan, and even Britain, tea drinking is still a highly social experience. Tea ceremonies may have evolved, but the sense of connection they fostered remains unchanged. And while the traditional, formal tea ceremonies have faded in the public eye, they have not disappeared entirely. Across China, and in other parts of Asia, there are still tea masters who preserve the ancient ways of tea making, passing down their knowledge to a new generation. These small, intimate gatherings, often held in traditional tea houses or private homes, continue to honor the cultural and spiritual aspects of tea drinking. There are still places where you can sit quietly, sip carefully prepared tea, and reflect on the slow, meditative process, just as the ancients did. Historians continue to discuss whether modern tea culture has fully captured the essence of the original tea ceremonies, or if it's simply a commercialized version of a once sacred practice. Some argue that tea culture has become too casual, too commercialized, losing the depth and spiritual meaning it once held. Others, however, believe that tea has adapted and thrived in the modern world, reaching even more people than ever before. Whether the formalities have been diluted or not, one thing remains clear. Tea is still a drink that brings people together, creates moments of calm, and continues to hold a special place in people's hearts. The rituals may have changed, but the magic of tea, that simple yet profound act of steeping leaves and sharing a cup, lives on. It's a drink that continues to connect people across cultures, continents, and centuries. The world of tea has come full circle, blending ancient traditions with modern sensibilities, but always staying true to its roots. And as long as there are cups to be filled and people to share them with, the story of tea will continue. As we reach the final leg of our journey, let's reflect on the lasting legacy of the ancient Chinese tea ceremony. Despite its transformation over the centuries, tea remains an enduring part of cultural practices across the world. What started as a simple, accidental discovery by Emperor Shen Nong has grown into a global phenomenon, one that continues to shape lives and connect people across cultures. And perhaps it is in this enduring legacy that the true beauty of tea lies. It is timeless. Looking back, we see how tea has evolved from its roots in imperial China to become a beverage for the masses. It once symbolized power, sophistication, and deep philosophical thought. Now, it is an accessible, widely loved drink enjoyed in countless forms and contexts. Whether it's a casual cup of green tea to start the day, a delicate oolong at an afternoon tea ceremony, or a soothing herbal blend before bed, tea continues to be part of our daily rituals. Its versatility and ability to adapt to modern life while maintaining its deep cultural roots are a testament to the profound impact it has had throughout history. But beyond the cultural and social significance, tea has also provided us with a remarkable sense of peace and calm. The ancient ceremony, with its slow, deliberate steps, offered a refuge from the chaos of life. In a world that often moves too fast, tea still gives us the chance to slow down, take a deep breath, and enjoy the simple pleasure of a warm, comforting drink. And it's not just the act of drinking tea that offers this peace, it's the entire experience. From the careful selection of the leaves to the quiet preparation and the moments of stillness shared with others. Tea, in its simplest form, is a reminder to savor the present moment. As we take a final sip of tea in our minds, we can't help but feel a connection to all those who have drunk from the same cup throughout history. From the emperors and scholars of ancient China to the humble tea drinkers of today, tea has remained a constant in our collective experience. Its story is one of cultural exchange, of evolution and adaptation, of resilience in the face of change. Tea's rich history has brought it to every corner of the globe, where it continues to be a symbol of hospitality, friendship, and shared moments. In the modern world, where traditions often clash with the demands of daily life, tea stands as a quiet reminder of the importance of slowing down, of finding time for contemplation, and of appreciating the simple, beautiful rituals that make life meaningful. The ancient Chinese tea ceremony, with all its elegance and wisdom, still whispers to us through the cups we hold today. And as we continue to pass down the art of tea, whether in formal ceremonies or casual moments, we carry forward a legacy that has lasted for centuries. So, as you sip your next cup of tea, whether you're alone or with friends, take a moment to reflect on the history behind it. Think of the ancient tea masters, the emperors, and the everyday people who have made tea a part of their lives. Let that connection deepen the enjoyment of the drink, and remember that in every cup there is a story that is still unfolding, sip by gentle sip.